Welcome everyone. You're listening to the account with a report for day 427 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you for joining me. Today I have an anniversary that needs mentioning. Also another document on Russia's long-term plans regarding other countries has surfaced. I further have updates on the phone call between Volodymyr Zelensky and Xi Jinping and the bilateral conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine which is taking place in Rome. All other updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. And now a quick look at today's anniversary. President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the 37th anniversary of the Chornobyl disaster by honoring the memory of the liquidators of the largest nuclear accident in human history. 37 years ago, the accident at the Chornobyl nuclear power plant left a huge scar for the whole world. A powerful explosion that occurred overnight on April 26, 1986, led to almost 8.5 million people being exposed to radiation, according to the United Nations. Today, the 30-kilometer zone around Chernobyl remains a dangerous place with a high concentration of radiation. Moving on to the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Russia renewed its assault inside the city and is gradually pushing the Ukrainian defenders out. This, however, comes at a high price as Russian casualties are reported to be staggering. Considering the fighting has moved way past the railway line now, we probably are seeing the final stages of the Bakhmut defense. Avdiivka. After numerous failed attacks, it seems Russia has decided to bypass Novokalinovo to the south. A large Russian attack around Nevelske was repelled, with videos shared on social media showing large losses on the Russian side. And now for the latest documents obtained, allegedly outlining Russia's long-term plans to influence countries. Journalists from several publications have obtained documents prepared several years ago, revealing Russia's strategy of influence in the Baltic states. The materials studied concern Russia's long-term plans for Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Similar plans of the Russian Federation have already been revealed for Belarus and Moldova. And to start the news segment, the updates on the phone call between Volodymyr Zelensky and Xi Jinping. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the President of China, Xi Jinping, had an hour-long telephone call. During the call, the leaders discussed possible cooperation that would help establish a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, with Chinese President Xi Jinping outlining his vision of the steps that should be taken to end the war. Pavlo Ryabikhin was appointed as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine to the People's Republic of China. Li Hui, a special representative of the People's Republic of China, who is a former Chinese ambassador to Russia, is to be sent to Ukraine and other countries for talks on regulating the Ukrainian crisis. While US officials welcomed the phone call between President Volodymyr Zelensky and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, they also expressed caution regarding whether it will lead to a meaningful peace movement. And now the updates on the bilateral conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine, which is taking place in Rome. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said at a bilateral conference in Rome that peace in Ukraine is only possible on Ukraine's conditions and not Russia's, that she hopes that Italy's experience with an economic miracle after World War II can be used to help Ukraine, that putting money in Ukraine now is not a risk but a far-sighted investment, and that Italy will help Ukraine fulfill as soon as possible the criteria necessary for its full membership in the European Union and speed up the beginning of negotiations on joining the European Community. Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, at the same conference, has thanked Italy's export credit agency SACE for planning to allocate €1 billion to Ukraine and said that Russia does not want peace. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine is interested in setting up production facilities for Western military equipment. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni further stated that Italy wants to host the Ukraine Recovery Conference in 2025. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his evening address on April 25th that the whereabouts of human rights defender Abdureshyt Dzhepparov, who was detained by Russian security forces in the temporarily occupied Crimea, remain unknown. Lieutenant General Mykola Oleshchuk, commander of the Ukrainian Air Force, has shared a video today showing the Patriot air defense system in operation in Ukraine. Serhiy Dvornik, Councillor of the Permanent Mission of Ukraine to the United Nations, has accused Russia of weaponizing information and using it as a deliberate strategy. Starting with destruction of independent media in Russia and killings of independent journalists, the Kremlin has created an information bubble with a parallel reality for millions of Russian people, the diplomat said. According to posts made by Caroline Nordengrip, the former Swedish MP has joined the Ukrainian army. Marking the 37th anniversary of the Chornobyl nuclear power plant disaster, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the world must do everything possible to prevent Russia from using nuclear facilities to blackmail Ukraine and the rest of the world. Google Maps has updated its satellite data for Ukraine and now shows parts of the destruction caused by the Russian invasion. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. The chief of the EU delegation in Ukraine, Mati Masikas, said in a video address on the occasion of the 37th anniversary of the nuclear disaster at the Chornobyl nuclear power plant that Russia's occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant significantly increases the risk of another accident and control should be transferred back to Ukraine. According to the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, Russian occupation authorities are detaining the local residents suspected of cooperation with Ukraine's forces and those whose views vary from Russian propaganda. People disappear and some never come back, the statement reads. Today is also the anniversary of the Russian ban on the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry said it firmly believes that the Ukrainian Crimea, like all other territories of Ukraine temporarily occupied by Russia, will be liberated soon, and the legal activities of all representative bodies of Ukraine, including the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people, will be restored. Residents of Sevastopol reported explosions on social media today. The representative of Ukraine's military intelligence, Andriy Yusov, said that the blasts in the temporarily occupied Crimea do not in any way violate the terms of the grain deal. Following the Crimea Wave Forum, Ukraine's Minister of Culture and Information Policy, Oleksandr Tkachenko, wrote that for the integration of Crimea, it is necessary to break Russian myth about the Ukrainian peninsula and return people to the Ukrainian context both domestically and internationally. As stated by Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar, Russia allegedly has started a resettling scheme in the occupied territories. Especially residents from poor and remote regions of the Russian Federation are being brought to Ukraine. The Russian occupation authorities are working on equipping shelters in temporarily occupied Crimea in case of air raid threats. An example are the shelters in the city of Alupka. Data from analyzed satellite images suggest that in recent months Russian troops have withdrawn their military equipment, which was located near the village of Medvedivka, Jankoy district, in the north part of temporarily occupied Crimea, and dug trenches. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. This is an article from yesterday, but I was only made aware of it after yesterday's report was finished. Russia claims to have deployed their T-14 Armata tanks to Ukraine. Currently, their role is indirect fire support and not offensive operations. The T-14 Armata is Russia's newest main battle tank. Its development commenced in 2011. The first mock-up was revealed to Russian military officials in 2013 and first publicly revealed in 2015. In 2022, some sources reported that development of this tank was stopped due to technical problems, funding problems, and problems with supply of key components. In 2023, a batch of 10 Armata tanks were spotted on a train in Russia. Most likely, these were pre-production tanks that were originally delivered to the Russian army in 2015. Many outside observers remain skeptical about the combat readiness of the T-14s. As stated by the Military Media Center, Russia is currently using about 369,000 soldiers in the war against Ukraine. According to the latest data, Russia has thrown up to 48 brigades and 122 regiments into military operations against Ukraine. The occupation forces number about 315 formations. In total, the enemy uses about 369,000 personnel and about 5,900 units of heavy weapons against the Ukrainian troops, the statement reads. The Russian embassy in London stated that the UK will not be able to avoid responsibility for the consequences of the use of depleted uranium ammunition that they supply to the Ukrainian armed forces. As a reminder, the United Kingdom has sent thousands of rounds of Challenger 2 tank ammunition to Ukraine, including depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds. Russia currently has 4 warships on combat duty in the Black Sea, 2 of which are missile carriers with a total salvo of up to 8 missiles. Journalists from news agencies in several northern European countries have found that many employees of Russian diplomatic missions in the region are likely to be undercover spies. The journalists identified several dozen people who were apparently employees of the Foreign Intelligence Service, Main Intelligence Directorate, or Federal Security Service, but who worked undercover as diplomatic staff. Russia has declared 10 workers of the Norwegian embassy in Moscow and the staff of the defense attaché unwelcome on its territory. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. 3 Russian military aircraft flying without transponder signals have been intercepted in international airspace over the Baltic Sea. The German Air Force has stated on Twitter that Germany and the United Kingdom sent Eurofighter jets to identify 2 Su-27 fighters and 1 Il-20 aircraft. The Air Force shared several photos of the Russian aircraft in flight. Ukraine is working with the US Federal Bureau of Investigation and American companies to collect evidence of war crimes by Russian forces, such as geolocation and cell phone information. The US Embassy in Kyiv stated that the international community has a moral obligation to hold Russian leaders accountable for the abduction of Ukrainian children. A bipartisan draft resolution regarding the position of the US House of Representatives on conditions of Ukraine's victory was presented in Washington, D.C., according to Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. A technical maintenance hub for the Leopard 2 main battle tanks supplied to Ukraine will be opened in Poland in May. The office of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said the country is not planning to leave the International Criminal Court as reported earlier. It is claimed to have been a communication error. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. Heavy short-range combat continues in the western districts of the contested Donetsk Oblast town of Bakhmut. A key development over the last week has been fighting on the outskirts of the town, especially near the village of Chornobyl, as Ukraine seeks to maintain control of its 0506 supply route. Ukraine's other resupply options into Bakhmut are likely complicated by muddy conditions on unsurfaced tracks. With the town having now been under attack for over 11 months, the Ukrainian defenses of Bakhmut have now been integrated as one element of a much deeper defensive zone, which includes the town of Chasiv Yar to the west. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Senior US and EU officials assess that Russian President Vladimir Putin would remain unwilling to negotiate in response to a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive. A Ukrainian military official claimed on April 25th that Ukrainian forces are achieving impressive results in counter-battery combat against Russian forces on the Russian-occupied eastern, left bank of the Dnipro River. Wagner Group financier Evgeny Prigozhin denied ISW's April 22nd assessment about limited improvements in Wagner's relations with the Russian military command ahead of the planned Ukrainian counteroffensive. Russian ultranationalists are continuing to advocate for the Kremlin to adopt Stalinist repression measures. The Kremlin continues to avoid adopting overtly repressive measures, likely out of concern for the stability of Putin's regime. Russian civil rights groups OVD Info, Memorial, and Rus Sidyashchaya, Russia Behind Bars, issued a legal challenge to the Russian censorship law against discrediting the Russian military on April 25th. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The main efforts of the enemy are focused on conducting offensive operations in the Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka directions. 43 enemy attacks were repelled during the day. The fiercest battles continue for Bakhmut and Marinka. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to conduct offensive actions. Heavy fighting continues for the city of Bakhmut. In addition, during the day, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of the settlements of Oryhovo-Vasilivka and Ivanivska. In the Avdiivka direction, the enemy carried out offensive actions in the Avdiivka, Siverne, and Pervomaisk areas of the Donetsk Oblast without success. In the Marinka direction, our defenders repelled numerous enemy attacks in the Marinka area during the day. And that wraps up the report. Should you be interested in any article I mentioned, you can find links to them in the description as usual. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.